Welcome to the Moms of Tweens and Teens podcast. If some days you doubt yourself and you don't know what you're doing, if you've ugly cried alone in your bedroom because you felt like you're failing, well, I just want you to know you're not alone and you have come to the right place. Raising tweens and teens in today's world is not easy, and I'm on a mission to equip you to love well and to raise emotionally healthy, happy tweens and teens that thrive. I believe that moms are heroes, and we have the power to transform our family and to impact future generations. If you are looking for answers, encouragement, and to become more of the mom and the woman that you want to be, welcome. I'm Cheryl Gould, and I am so glad that you're here. Well, welcome, friend, to the show today, and I am so happy that you're here and listening in. And do you ever wonder why you get so reactive about what your tween or teen says or does? One minute they say something and it doesn't really bother you, and then the next moment they say something else and you feel like you're about to lose it, or you do. You end up yelling, and what maybe was a 5 becomes this explosion, and you're at a level 10 or 12, and you're like, what just happened? Why is that? Well, in today's episode, my special guest is Shelly Robinson, and she's a certified conscious parent coach, and she's the founder of Raising Yourself, and she's also the creator of the Connected Kid Toolkit. Shelly is passionate about helping parents break generational cycles, which is one of the reasons I just loved this interview, and she loves to help parents build emotionally connected homes. With over 500,000 parents around the world engaging with her work, she's helping families transform their relationships one step at a time. Shelly's work has been featured on platforms like Mind Valley, GoZen, Raising Good, and Good News LA. She's got a wealth of wisdom that she shares in this episode, and I'm so excited for you to hear our conversation and to hear all about what she is doing to help parents like you. So let's dive in. Well, welcome, Shelly, to the show, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here, Cheryl.
And you are a conscious parenting coach and the founder of Raising Yourself, and you help parents to do the deeper inner work of reparenting themselves. And I love that. When you first reached out to me, I'm like, this is it. This is what it's all about. Even though we don't want to hear that, we want to, fix our kids.
Right.
And then it's like, what? We have to reparent ourselves. So we're going to dive into that. But first, I just want to start out by having our listeners hear just a little bit about your story and what led you to become a conscious parenting coach.
Yeah, I would love to share that. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here talking about this deep work and those inconvenient truths. So,
Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Okay.
bless you. Sneeze away. Yeah, so I'm a certified parenting coach, but I began this journey of reparenting myself and really owning those inconvenient truths probably about a decade ago. I have a 14-year-old boy and an almost 10-year-old girl, and I remember thinking when they were much, much younger that my idea of conscious parenting was just getting my kids to do what I wanted in a much gentler way, right? I wasn't gonna like scream at them and threaten them and spank them, but I thought they're still gonna do what I want, but I'm just gonna do it in a gentler way. And that didn't go well. And I ended up kind of discovering through that attempt at conscious parenting that I was needing to rely too much on willpower, right? So if you can think of something that you're like trying not to do, whether it's like scroll TikTok or eat too much candy before bed or whatever it might be, if you're not addressing the deeper cause of that's causing you to reach for those things or to yell at your child, then you end up just running out of steam when you don't have that willpower bandwidth or capacity, right? So there was an instance when my son was 4 that kind of started me on this journey, and he wouldn't brush his teeth. And it was a very typical, like, developmentally appropriate. Why would I want to brush my teeth? My teeth are fine. And we were going back and forth, and something kind of just snapped inside of me after the sixth or seventh time he wouldn't do it. And I screamed at him in that scary, like, immediately, like, oh, I can't believe I did that. I feel like a monster. I'm almost 6 feet tall. He was so tiny back then, and he just looked terrified of me. And it was literally in that moment when I thought, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I need to like look at what's going on beneath the surface that caused such an explosive reaction, because it was so disproportionate to what was actually happening in that moment, right? And that is when I started getting really interested in this idea of reparenting yourself and understanding your triggers and how to raise yourself right alongside your kid.
I love that. And that you did it when they were so young, that
Yeah.
you had enough discernment, insight to go, oh, this is something, there's something going on inside of me that
Right.
needs reparenting. Did you hear those words? Because I think somewhere, did you read a book that sparked that for you?
Yeah, I'm sure I did. It's so long ago that it's not crystal clear what that book was, but I suspect it was probably a Dr. Shafali book. And I
Hmm.
know she talks in all of her books a lot about, reparenting that younger part of yourself that didn't get what you needed. And in that moment with my son, I was not being heard. And it wasn't 40-year-old Shelly that wasn't being heard. It was 5-year-old Shelly that wasn't being heard. So then I locked horns. It was like little me against my son, right? So then your inner
Yes.
child is fighting your actual child, and you really do go back in time and you forget who you are in that moment, that you're a capable, confident adult who's, capable of handling the situation. You kind of revert back to old patterns. And you don't mean to. And I have forgiven myself and I repaired after that moment, of course. But it really shines a light on how much work as adults and parents we have to do when it comes to healing those wounds that we all left with, right? I mean, we could have had wonderful childhoods, and whether it was from our parents or a teacher or a coach, we all exited childhood with some level of wounding, right? And that doesn't mean our parents and our coaches and our teachers were all bad. They were probably passing on some stuff that they inherited too, right? It's not about blaming or judging or shaking our fingers at anyone. It's about saying, ooh, I inherited that, and I certainly don't want to pass that on to the next generation.
Yes, yes. So much of what you're saying, it's so good. And I really want our listeners to think about this, because I really think it's at the root of our reactivity. And
Yeah.
we often just want to fix the behavior. Stop yelling, right?
Yes.
Don't do that
Mhm.
anymore. We feel so guilty, like you said. And it's like, why can't I know better, right? But why can't I change this reaction? And so I see that in a lot with the moms that I work with.
Yeah.
And that whole kind of concept of reparenting, I love that, because that's what I ended up doing and realizing. But my daughter was in middle school when I was getting triggered all over the place.
Yeah.
And that's how I started Moms of Tweens and Teens, because I find a lot of the things that maybe we could control when they were younger, when they become tweens
Yes.
and they start, the hormones start acting up and they're pushing away,
Yeah.
that we can really start getting triggered because we feel out of control. Like, what? Now they're arguing with me. Now they're
Right.
disagreeing. Like, now they're dressing a different way. Like, it's
Yeah.
not supposed to be this way.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so much was getting triggered in me. And then I ended up going into her therapy session with her. And kind of like what you were saying, standing in the bathroom, it dawns on me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm the one that
Mm.
needs help here. And so much of it, and you talk about anger, um, in a lot of what you've written, it was the anger. It was that she was expressing a lot of anger, and growing up, anger was not okay.
Yeah.
It was okay to cry. And then I made that connection, but it wasn't right
Mhm.
away. It was like years later, oh, I'm crying, but I really think I'm angry. But
Yeah.
like anger wasn't safe, right?
Yeah.
And so, did you see, like, can you link some of your behaviors, like rules that you had in your family? Or, like, I think you've talked, I've read a lot of your stuff, like image, like our
Yeah.
kids are supposed to do things a certain way and that
Right.
reflects on us. What were some of yours?
Well, I'm going to share with you an incident that just happened recently because I feel like I probably have dozens and dozens that I could share. And I'm just going to pick one that maybe even two that happened recently that are really fresh in my mind. So I have a 14-year-old, as I mentioned, and I'm often reminding him, like, hey, buddy, like your clothes are on the floor. Can you please get them off the floor, throw them in the washer, whatever, just like picking up after himself. And I use my kids' bathroom sometimes because it's where the only bath in the house is. And I am like notorious for just leaving my crap in there and leaving my clothes in there. And I don't really think much about it. And the other day, my son came up to me and he was like, Mom, respectfully, he's like, he was kind of being cute about it. He was trying to like be lighthearted. And he was like, could you please get your clothes out of my bathroom? And he was totally like respectful. He's like, they're just in there every week and they're just like in my way and our bathroom's small. And he kind of like listed all the reasons. And there was a part of me that wrote like that was like bubbling at the surface that was like, who does he think he is asking me to pick up my laundry? And I literally, and that's a built-in narrative. Well, not maybe built-in, but an inherited narrative, right? That I picked up somewhere along the way that like, how dare a child ask me to like do what I'm asking him to do? The nerve, right? To not be hypocritical. And I just looked at him and I had to like quiet that little voice that was like my ego, right? That was all like puffed up and like, how dare he? And I was like, yeah, sorry about that. I'm like, I am notorious for just like taking a bath, leaving my clothes and like not picking. I'm like, I hate putting my clothes away just as much as you do. And I was like, I will do that. Thank you for asking me so nicely. And that was it. And it was literally like a 60, 90-second conversation. But had I indulged in that tiny little narrative that I had inherited, that could have turned into a completely unnecessary like moment of friction, right?
Yeah. So in that moment, you were that's exactly what you were doing, was reparenting yourself in that moment.
Right. Yeah. Giving not only yourself. So when I talk about reparenting, I often describe it as giving that little smaller version of yourself what you did not receive in childhood. But it's also about giving your actual child what you didn't receive in childhood. And that's the essence of cycle breaking, too, right? Because when we're reparenting, we're simultaneously breaking cycles that we don't want to pass on to the next generation. So, yes, in that moment, I think I gave little me and my son, who is big, not big me, but he's 14 and he's 6'2" now. So he feels like a giant. He's like interacting with an adult now. But yeah, I think I gave us both what we needed and deserved. And so that was a really small but very cool moment that I think will live with me probably far longer than it lives with him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good example. I think sometimes the little examples are the best,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
understand in that moment how easily we want to be defensive.
yeah.
That younger part that maybe got criticized growing up, that you weren't
Right,
doing it right.
right, right. Or that you didn't have a voice. Like, how dare you
Mm-hmm.
like ask the parent to do something? It's that sort of hierarchy that I'm trying to dismantle in our family. And that's not to say that you're not the guide and you're not the leader as the parent. Of course you are. But it's those simple little interactions that can just send a really clear, empowering message to your kid that, like, yeah, thank you for asking me that. Like, thank you for telling me what you needed. Your voice matters, and I'm going to honor that. And
Yeah.
it kind of comes full circle because the next time you ask your kid to do something, maybe they're not going to do it 100% of the time, right? Because they're kids and they're going to forget, but they're going to be a lot more likely to cooperate because they felt respected in their requests.
Yes, yes. I love the how he felt the freedom
Yeah.
to say that to you.
Yeah, me too. I was grateful for that, despite
Yeah.
my little ego being like,
I know.
yeah,
Yeah, I know we're both Enneagram twos, and
yeah,
some people might not know what that means, but we have a one wing. And a one wing is more of the perfectionist too. And I used to get so defensive.
hmm,
I've really worked hard on that. And I think a lot of that was because of those perfectionistic tendencies, trying so hard to do everything right. So if
yeah,
anybody ever pointed out anything, that was wrong, so to speak, which
yeah,
wasn't really that it was wrong. They were just sharing with me something maybe that hurt them or that they didn't
right,
like your son,
right.
young kid in me that was trying to do everything right to not get in trouble, then, I felt like in trouble and I would get defensive. And so talk about you have three legs to the stool. And I think that's really helpful to kind of think of it like that as our listeners we're unpacking this for them.
Yeah, our inner child is one of the legs of the stool, so that's the reparenting, our actual child, and then us. And it all comes full circle. And when I say us, I mean like us as the adult parent leading both our inner children and our child. And helping that all really flow harmoniously really starts with acknowledging that we have a younger version inside of us that probably needs a little bit of TLC so that we can support our actual child and so that we can feel so that we're coming from a place of wholeness and from a sturdy foundation when we are triggered by our kids, right? So, yeah, that doesn't mean we're never going to get annoyed with our kids and that we're never going to be triggered again. But when those moments arise, we're coming from a place that has been healed or at least mostly healed, and we have a different more compassionate capacity to act from and to respond from, right? If we're responding from our wounds, we're always going to respond in anger because our wounds are where we're the most scared, right? So, like me reacting to my son when I was yelling at him about him not brushing his teeth, I was saying, I am so scared I am never going to be heard. My own child won't even listen to me. Who's going to listen to me? Is anyone ever going to listen to me? That was little Shelly, right? And so now I have those wounds have healed, at least that like voice that says my voice doesn't matter. And so now when my kids do something that trigger me, I can just 5 seconds. I'm safe and I can do this or I'm capable or whatever sort of like mantra or anchor feels good to you. Just that little pause can prevent so much damage from happening.
Yeah. What have you found are some helpful um things that you say to yourself? I'm safe. I watched
Mhm.
your Instagram, everybody's wonderful. And I love that you did like you're safe.
Yeah.
Things that we need to talk to that younger version
Yeah.
of ourselves and tell them what they need to hear. And
Yeah.
I know it sounds woo-woo sometimes to people, but it's so true. It's
It
like little
is.
kids inside all of us that are asking all the time, like, do I matter? And,
Right.
feeling misunderstood and feeling criticized. And, we're just, yeah.
Yeah. So a couple of my favorites that I repeat to myself are how would little me have wanted to be treated in this moment? So just
Mm,
kind of like having like this mental image of yourself and how she would have wanted to be treated in that moment. And I love saying to myself, this isn't so much to our inner child, but more to like grown-up versions of us. We're on the same team. Like it doesn't feel like it when you're in a conflict with your child, but I even say that to my kids, especially my teen when it feels like, he's in a feisty mood and he really wants to go to like battle. And I'm like, dude, we are on the same team. Like I am literally on your team. I want what's best for you. And so just like even saying that out loud can sometimes disarm a teen or a tween who's just ready, sometimes they're just ready for battle. And the other one, probably my favorite, is I want to feel good on the other side of this, right? That feeling I had when I had screamed at my son all those years ago, that was not the feeling I ever want to have. And that was kind of what propelled me into action. I was like, oh my God, I don't ever want to feel like this again. Like just the guilt and the shame and like I just felt terrible about it. And so I just try to enter those conflicts with that intention. Like, I want us to both, not just me, but really both of us to feel good on the other side of this. Like, we were both heard, we were both respected. Maybe one of us didn't get the outcome we were hoping for, but the feeling of being intact and securely attached is still there.
Hmm. Um, I think it's very helpful to say out loud what you said. The we're on the same team.
Yeah.
I'm for you. It's just kind of like putting a stake in the ground, and like we are
Yeah.
on the same team. It might not feel like it right now,
Yeah.
but I am for you. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think that's a really helpful thing to find those things. Maybe we can even sometimes say out loud um, that are going to help us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so as far as like the repair, because moms I work with do feel a lot of the time like they're failing, and they do feel guilty that they're yelling.
Yeah.
And what do you do in that moment when you feel like, oh, I blew it,
Yeah.
I didn't like the way I handled that? Do you find you still have some of those moments where, you don't respond the way that you wish that you would have?
Absolutely. I can just this week with my daughter, my 9-year-old, I got frustrated with her. I don't even remember exactly what it was. And we never remember those details, right? But we remember how we made them feel. We remember how we felt in those moments. And I wouldn't even say I yelled, but I did say something in a kind of like elevated voice tone and it felt kind of snarky. And there is like no tolerance for that from either of my kids. And so they're not afraid to immediately, call me out for that. And also in my daughter's case, she left this conversation upset with me. And I knew as soon as she walked upstairs, I was like, oh, I could have handled that so much differently. So, like I just knew it. And at that day, I had very little capacity for like compassion and patience. And I was just like running ragged myself. And I'm not saying that as an excuse. It was just one of those days where when that moment happened, I was already like the pot was already boiling and I just had nothing left. So I came up there to her bedroom and I was like, I'm sorry, for speaking rudely to you. I could have handled that better. And she was just really clear about like why she was upset with me. And I said, that makes sense. You should be upset with me. You don't deserve to be spoken to like that. And I said, what I should have done before we had that conversation was taken a deep breath or collected myself. And I didn't do that. And then I like spilled all my anger all over you. And that was not fair at all. And she's like, it really wasn't. And I'm like, I know. And I'm like, I know. The message has been received. But yeah, it's just, like letting them tell you that you messed up. And obviously they can do it in a way that's respectful. They don't have to be like mean-spirited about it. But again, it's just letting that ego just kind of take a back seat and be like, yep, I did it. And that's actually something I haven't mentioned yet is the one word I think we have to just cling to in this reparenting journey is humility. Like if
Mhm.
someone says, sum up parenting in one word for me, it's humility. Like if you're not willing to just own up to those times you do mess up, like it's your kid's gonna know. Like they're gonna know that they have a parent who's not willing to apologize, who's not willing to own up to their mistakes, and it does affect your relationship.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, we got to talk more about this. I was laughing because I was just at a meeting, like a growth group, and we were talking about how easy it is if we're confronted in that situation with your daughter saying, yes, it was hurtful,
Yeah.
to not say, but, and then
Yeah.
try and explain ourselves.
Yeah.
And but actually like erases, and I
Yeah.
learned that a long time ago, actually in marriage therapy. But the therapist was like, no, but just erased everything you just said before that. And
It
it was
does.
like, Oh, yes.
Uh,
It's like taking this big, like, yeah, and just invalidating.
hmm
But you said, let your ego die. So, what's the ego? Because what do you consider? I mean, we kind of think we know, okay, ego, but what do you consider the ego?
Well, for me, I think it's you summed it up perfectly earlier. It's those perfectionistic tendencies where we think we're like infallible, like I wouldn't make that mistake. And it's pride, right?
Yeah.
And I think that just gets in the way of love. And that sounds a little like maybe cheesy now that I've just said that out loud, but it really does. I think when we're unwilling to see our own mistakes and the error of our ways, it prevents our children from feeling close to us because now we're making them wrong. And it's hard to be close to someone that makes you feel wrong. And,
Yeah.
and yeah, so and my kids have no problem calling me out. My son did it in an even more direct way when we were having a conversation a couple weeks ago, and he said, "I have some feedback about your parenting." And I was like, "Buckle up, everyone." I was like,
Why
and
did I teach you this?
I
Feedback.
know, like
As
in
long
those,
as
yes. I don't like it in those moments because it's not like I'm like all rainbows and unicorns about it. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be so lovely. I can't wait for him to dish on me, about what it is he thinks about my parenting. And I was like, like a kind of a crack of the neck. And I was like, okie dokie. And I was like, what is it? And, he went on to tell me, I'll tell you what he told me. He's like, you're always asking me to assume the best in people when we're having like some conflicts. And he's like, I don't think you're assuming the best in me right now. And I was like, the gasp. But I mean, for whether I believe that to be true or not, that was his perception. And I said, okay, I am so glad you told me that. I didn't see it that way at all, but I can understand why you would see it that way, right? It's just like validating like his perception of what's happening. I really didn't feel wrong or bad in that moment. And I did see where he was coming from. So we were just able to like kind of have that conversation. And then he moved on. Like once he got it out of his system and then I validated him, I was like, yeah, I can see like I'm not totally walking my talk here. Um,
yeah.
and then we kind of sorted it out. But I think when you don't give kids the chance to like give you that feedback, everything just gets amplified by 10 times, right? It gets worse, it gets uglier. Everyone's tugging on their rope even tighter. And then again, like there's really no room for love or compassion with those other ingredients in the
Yeah.
mix.
Yeah. Defensiveness really does get in the way of that connection and feeling heard.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
there's one thing I think that's like one of the biggest killers, it's what you're talking about, like getting defensive.
hmm
And our kids don't feel heard. And I remember one of my kids coming to me and they were really working on growing and learning about themselves and coming kind of clean in their relationships. And so they sat me down. And this was when they were in their 20s and kind of told me how they felt about certain things I had done.
Okay.
And I remember just thankfully knowing enough that it was so important to healing. And we had a good relationship, but these things needed to be said in order to really create a stronger relationship where they would feel heard. But I would tell you, some of that stuff was really hard to hear
Yeah.
because it wasn't really how it went down in my mind, right? It was like, well, I wanted to go, well, but this was what was really happening and defend, but I knew, that is not going to be helpful. If we want healing,
Yeah.
then we need to be able to say, wow, I can see why that would have really hurt you. And
Oh, I love that. I love
yeah,
that.
and that's where the healing happens. But if I had in that moment gotten really defensive and tried to explain why
Yeah.
I did that, they wouldn't have felt heard. And that's exactly what you're saying. Like to validate them, the results are so much better.
Yeah.
But it takes humility and knowing like we're not going to do it perfectly.
Right. Right. And you gave your adult kids, a gift that like thousands and millions of adult kids would give anything to hear from their parents.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was very grateful I could do that, but it didn't make it easy.
Right. Right. It's a
You
hard, it
know,
is a
there's,
very hard pill to swallow. There's no sugar to go down with it. It's just icky and no one
yeah.
likes it. But on the other side of it, there is like, hopefully that connection remains intact and even gets stronger.
Yes. And, and later to give the moms that are like, oh, a little hope later, down the road, we were able to talk about those things that had happened. And I was able to share this was what was happening with me,
Right.
but it was out of a place having validated that pain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. You opened up their capacity to hear you,
Yeah.
but they couldn't have maybe heard you had you not validated them first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you're doing some super cool stuff that I want you to tell them about with these cards you've created. So tell them, and I want to know your process of even how you came up with what you've created. So yeah,
Ah, thank
tell
you.
them. Yeah.
So, yeah, I have a product that's called the Connected Kid Toolkit. And I started this during the pandemic because I just had a creative itch that wasn't getting scratched in any other way. And during that time, we were all spending so much time with our children, right? So much time. But with that extra time with my kids, I just kept finding myself wanting to say these phrases to them. And it's right when I started raising yourself. And I thought, gosh, it would be really cool if we had like little conversation cards to go through every day. Wouldn't that be fun? We're sitting around on the couch together. And I couldn't find anything that existed that I really liked. And I also wanted it to really tie to inner child work because I think there are so many tools out in the world that are just for the kids, which is wonderful. But I was like, parents, I'm like, we need healing and we need support and we need our own resource. So, these cards are really not just only for our children, but they're for little us to read too. And I think when I started sharing this with small groups of parents at the very beginning phases of this, almost everyone that came back to me said, I was sobbing because I needed to hear all of these things when I was little, and they hadn't even used them with their kids yet. So there's a reparenting workbook that comes with it, and there's activities that come with it. Because another thing I wanted was like, well, I don't want parents just to read these cards and be like, well, that's enough. Like, I wanted there to be actual things you could do to make them come to life, right? So there's really fun, and they're all free activities that you can just do to kind of supplement the cards so the kids actually feel those conversations come to life. And then we just created an app for it. So that's really exciting. So I just love having something out in the world that I truly hope just heals little us and also helps us to break cycles so that we're not passing on that hot potato of pain to the next generation.
Yeah. And I love that this is a way to do this work. I call it work, but
Yeah.
healing, right? As
Yeah.
it sounds, but this healing and to break those patterns in our families because it's repetition.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what I love about your cards because if we have neural pathways and we can rewire those neural pathways, so it keeps it right there to talk about it with our kids. So you're instilling over and over and over again these truths.
Yeah.
When we're little, that for whatever reasons, we have gaps and we have
Yeah.
we have those wounds and we can't get out of growing up without them. It's just we're humans, right?
That's right.
But I love it because it brings it to life and you're doing it with your kids.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. It comes full circle. It's again that sort of like three-legged stool that you mentioned earlier, where it really ties in the inner child work, the work with your child, and then your work as an adult, as a parent. So it really, I hope that it makes it more accessible because I know when you're starting out on this journey and you just want to stop yelling, right? And you want to stop threatening, that's kind of the surface level stuff. And everything like the reparenting and the inner child work. I know when I started out on that, I was like, ooh, this feels a little woo for me. This feels like too abstract. I don't know how to make this like a real thing in my life. And I'm hoping that a toolkit like this makes it accessible because when you break it down into these little strong, powerful statements, you're like, oh, I didn't even know I needed to hear that, but I did. And that kind of like healed something inside of me.
Yeah, I love that. What is like one example of something that you do in the reparenting workbook?
Oh, so yeah, there's a lot. Well, there's six categories in this toolkit. I won't list them all, but some of them include unconditional love, apologizing, things like that. So aligned to each of those categories are journal prompts in the reparenting workbook. So there are just questions that kind of invite you very gently to probe into your childhood and document and write down like things that you're like, ooh, I think I could have gotten more of this. And again, it's not like this exercise of like bashing your parents or blaming anyone. It's just this kind of gentle exercise where you're responding to what happened. And then you're saying, okay, I didn't get that. Now, how am I going to give that to myself as an adult? And
Yeah.
it's very practical so that it's not just like this, I'm very angry and I'm going to write down everything I hated about my childhood, but it's really taking those wounds and saying, okay, this is what happened. And here's what we're going to do about it. And we're
Yeah.
going to do that for little me, and we're also going to do that for my child so that we both grow up together, right? And raise ourselves.
Yeah. We are definitely, our kids are our best teachers.
Yeah. Yeah. They are mirrors for
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. So tell them where to find you, and I'll put all the show notes, all the links in the
Wonderful.
show notes. Oh, and I know. Tell them because I just want them to get a taste. Tell them a couple of the cards.
Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you one of them. In fact, if it's okay with you, I
Yeah,
have it
yeah,
up
yeah,
right
yeah.
here.
Because they might not really understand what they say.
Yeah.
So I think they're super cool.
So I don't know if you can see this. Actually, the lighting's really bad here, but one of them, this one says, "You never have to earn my love." And then there's writing on the back of each card. So there's the big statement, and then on the back of each card, it unpacks it a little bit more so you can share more if you want to. Another one is, "You are valuable regardless of your achievements." That's a good one.
Mm,
That's one I read all the time. I have to read that one all the time. And there are quite a few cards that talk about anger and how anger is okay and helping children and adults kind of unpack what's underneath of the anger so the anger isn't demonized, but it's rather accepted. We're not saying, like accept the actions from the anger, but accept the anger to help diffuse it and to kind of get underneath what's causing it, what fear is underneath of that. So there's a lot of that in these cards because I think so many kids and so many of us grew up with our anger being shamed
yes.
and just shut down, and that anger doesn't just magically go away, right? It like simmers and it builds and it amplifies. And so a lot of those cards just help kids work through that so they don't feel ashamed for being angry.
Yeah, and they can figure out, okay, anger is like a good emotion that it tells us that we need to pay attention to it. There's something that's going
Yeah.
on. Maybe we have to have a conversation with somebody. Maybe we need to use our voice to say, stop, or that's not okay, or I'm
Yeah.
hurt.
Right.
So now I'm angry, but I'm really hurt or I'm really sad. And
Yeah.
so much good information underneath anger.
Yeah. So much.
Yeah. Yeah. So they can get all of that. So they go, say again, because I
Yeah.
interrupted.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think I mentioned it, but those are available at kidtoolkit.com. And my website's shellyrobinson.com. So if you forget that first site, you can just go to shellyrobinson.com and all of my resources. I have both free resources and resources you can invest in for your family. Everything's on there. I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Raising Yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And one of them, and with having tweens and teens, it's really good with what I've seen with the cards. It's even that there was one like you're allowed to disagree with me, something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that having tweens and teens, we need to hear that. It's okay. They're trying to find their voice. They're trying to learn how to assert themselves. It might
Yeah.
come out sideways, but
Hmm.
I thought your cards are very good for being able to open up a conversation around this too. Like, okay,
Yeah.
is it really okay to disagree with me? What does everybody think here? Like using
Yeah.
it that way. Do you find some people have used it that way where you use it as a talking tool?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, when I went through with my kids, we would do them at night. And when the cards came and I got to see them for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we get to do these together. We'd sit in the bed every night. And instead of reading them as statements, some of them I read as statements because they made sense to do that. But some of them like that, they were just discussion points. They were kind of like almost like journal prompts. Like, what do you think about this? Do you feel like you can disagree with me? Do you feel like you can have a different point of view with me in this house? And like they were just jumping off points for having those deeper conversations and making sure that what I was putting on those cards were actually true and happening in my house. So Yeah, I think they're just really good conversation pieces for both the parents and the kids. It's a great dinner time tool, right? If you don't want to talk about like how was your day at dinner and you want to have these deeper conversations, it opens up all sorts of interesting conversations. And it also sheds light, depending on how old your kids are, into your childhood. Like, well, you can tell your kids, like, well, when I grew up, I wasn't really, like my opinion wasn't quite as validated. And I want to, you can do that in a way without like making
Yeah.
them, hey,
Mhm.
grandma and grandpa, right? But like, delivering that message in a way that just says, I want to make sure that you feel heard. And like, are there any examples when you haven't felt heard? Can you tell me about that? So it really is like a jumping off point for so many cool conversations that you might not otherwise have.
I love that. We need help on how do we have those more meaningful conversations with our kids and help. And we didn't even talk about that a lot, but how to help our kids build that emotional intelligence, which is
Yeah.
part of your work. So yeah.
Thank you for letting me share. I really appreciate it. I love talking.
Yeah, I love it. So thank you, Shelly, so much for the work that you do.
Yeah.
And make sure you check everything out in the show notes. And yeah, I appreciate you. And this has been awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate this conversation.
Well, that's it for today, friend. And thank you so much for joining me. And I have a special announcement. I am so excited. Many of you know that we have a membership here, and we have 3 levels actually, and I'm not going to go into all the detail. You can check it out on momsoftweensandteens.com, but many of you wanted to join and you were like, you know what? I just cannot I can't do it with my budget right now. So we have created an $8 a month membership that is awesome. You receive monthly workshops. I do live. You have a whole community and it's available through the Mighty Network app. And there's a community you can go to and ask questions. I personally engage with you. Every question that is asked, I answer. And also we have all kinds of resources. We have an archive of all kinds of past workshops and conversation scripts and all kinds of connection tools. We have things around anxiety and motivation and disrespect and just a plethora of screens. We just did a whole workshop on how to set limits with screens with your kid over the summer. And there's so much great stuff coming up. So I want to encourage you to check it out. If you're looking for more support in your life and your parenting, I highly recommend it. It is so worth it. And I want to get to know you. And so many of the moms that have joined, not so many, but quite a few are like, I listen to the podcast. That's how I know who you are. And so if you're one of those people and you just want to try it out, you can go to momsoftweensandteens.com, and that whole page is all about the membership. So I hope you'll check it out. Let me know when you join so I can say, yay, you heard this on the podcast, and personally welcome you. So have a great week, and I am so looking forward to seeing you back here next time.